فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Yunus Mirza and welcome to the Islamic Mary podcast. Or as I've been mentioning before, I'm writing the second edition to my book, The Bible and the Qur'an, Biblical Figures in the Islamic Tradition with John Kaltner. And part of our work is to review the various entries, to update them, and to cite the relevant literature that has been produced in the last couple of years regarding the Bible and the Qur'an. And it's been an amazing journey to see what new scholars have been publishing, some new insights they have in the Bible and the Qur'an, and how it's relevant to us as scholars, teachers, and students. So one of the articles I read recently was by Saqib Hussein, The Bitter Lot of the Rebellious Wife: Hierarchy, Obedience, and Punishment in 434. Now, this verse has generated a lot of interesting discussion in the last 50 years or so regarding the question of gender equality, hierarchy, and discipline within the Islamic tradition. And this verse was not necessarily of interest for classical commentators. They understood it in a particular way, and there were various interpretations of it that were consistent throughout up until the modern period. But one of the questions in the modern era is the idea of gender equality. What is the relationship between men and women? Are women equal to men? Are they subpar? Are they even better than men in some areas? And they maybe represent the divine will or represent that of a just and harmonious society. So in this verse, there is a particular word that I want to focus on today, that Saqib Hussein mentions and does a commentary of, and that's the idea of devout. And this word is used throughout the Qur'an, but it's used also in regards to Maryam. And as many of you know, I've written a book on the Islamic Mary, and this word is used to describe her, that she is min al-qanitin. So she's among the devout. So the verse 434 starts and says, Ar-rijal qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa. So men are the caretakers of women. So this is a debate and discussion here, that ar-rijal, so it's using the plural of men. So is this men meaning husband, or this is all men? Husbands, sons, uncles, it's all men that are required to take care of their women. And this is a debate. Many scholars in the Islamic tradition will understand this to mean husbands, zawj or azwaj, but I think there's some intentionality here in the Qur'an mentioning ar-rijal. So this is speaking about men in general, that they have a responsibility to their women. And it continues and says qawwamun. So here there's been various translations and differences of opinion of what qawwamun mean. Does it mean maintainers, caretakers? Does this mean they have dominion and power over women? And then it continues and says bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum 'ala ba'd. So God has favored some people over others, وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, from what they have doing or supporting them financially. So here you see there's emphasis on the idea of money, of a breadwinner, that traditionally men had more access to wealth, they were out working, and they were responsible to take care of the various women within their life financially. And then we get to the point that I want to speak about today, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ qanitat. So these women that is mentioned are righteous, they are devoutly obedient, qanitat, and when alone, protective of what God has entrusted with them. حَافِظَاتُ الْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. These women are chaste and they're loyal to their husbands. So the question here is, what does the word qanitat mean? Is that they're devout to their husbands or they're devoted to God? So this is a really important discussion because it goes to the idea of hierarchy. So are women in the Islamic tradition supposed to be simply obedient to their husbands, or are they supposed to be obedient to God? And this is a larger debate and question regarding the Qur'an and gender equality. So one of the things that Saqib Hussein does in this article is he says, let's look at this word and look at how it's explained in other verses within the Qur'an. And one of the chapters that speaks about this idea of qanitat is Surah At-Tahrim, or what is forbidden. And this chapter discusses a conflict between the Prophet Muhammad and his wives, and particularly two wives that seem to have gone into a coalition or alliance against the Prophet Muhammad and against the other wives. And the Prophet Muhammad is chastised, and he's told that he shouldn't make things that are halal or permissible haram. So part of the asbab al-nuzul, or the occasions of revelations, is that the Prophet Muhammad received a gift from one of his wives, and he said, I'm not going to eat this honey or this gift to please my other wives. The Quranic revelation says that do not make things that are halal haram. Do not make things that are permissible prohibited. In particular, the gift that was given to him by one of his wives, and that being of honey. So here, one of the verses in the beginning of the chapter, it uses this word qanitat. And it says, Asa rabbuhu in tallaqa kunna ay yubdilahu azwaja khayran min kunna muslimatin mu'minatin qanitat. So here it says that the Qur'an mentions that the God, his Lord, has the ability to separate, so that the Prophet Muhammad could separate from some of his wives, divorce them, and then he could receive other wives that are better. And these wives are Muslims, they submit to God, they are mu'min, they're believers, and they're qanitat, that they are devout. And here it's universally understood that this is that meaning that they're devout to God. The verse continues and it says ta'ibat, meaning that they seek repentance, and they're abidat, they worship God. Sa'ihat, that they are also fasting, and that thayyibat wa abkara, they're previously married or have not been married before. So this is important, that in this particular chapter we see another example of qanitat. This example is used to discuss that of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad and being devout to God. Now this word once again reemerges at the end of the chapter. So at the end of the chapter there's this fascinating section that talks about how spouses do not always represent their partner. So the example of the wife of Lot is given, the wife of Noah, and how they did not follow their prophets, their husbands, in the worship of God, and how actually they work to undermine their efforts. And then the chapter ends discussing two Quranic women that are models of emulation. The first one is that of Asya, the wife of Fir'aun, and it mentions that she did not follow her husband. So her husband was considered to be a tyrant, evil man, and he is someone that actually is understood within the Islamic tradition to have persecuted, even tortured Asya. And the verse starts and says, we give an example for the believers, the wife of Pharaoh, when she said, O my Lord, build me a house in paradise near you. Deliver me from Pharaoh and his evil doing, and save me from the wrongdoing people. So here she makes this beautiful prayer, and she says, قَدْ رَبِّبْنِي لِعِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. So she's asking for a house, a palace that is close to God in paradise. And this is fascinating because Pharaoh is understood to live in a beautiful house, a mansion, a palace, but she wants this house in Jannah, in paradise, close to God. And she wants to be saved from Fir'aun, who is her husband, right? And seen as an evildoer, a tyrant, and his various actions. And then she makes a general prayer to save me from those who are wrongdoers. Now we get to the last verse in the chapter, and it speaks about Maryam. And Maryam in the Islamic tradition is fascinating because her fiance, Joseph, which is mentioned in the biblical tradition, is not noted. So you never really hear about Joseph, not Yusuf the prophet, but Joseph the fiance of Maryam. And here in this particular verse, it mentions her as Maryam ibnat Imran. So she is the daughter of Imran. So she's not necessarily even noted here as the mother of Jesus, but she is a daughter. And I have an article which I speak about the importance of Maryam and daughters in the Islamic tradition. And then it continues and it says, Allati ahsanat farjaha. So she is someone who was chaste. She was someone that guarded her chastity. فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهِ مِن رُوحِنَا. And part of her elevated status is that we breathe into her our spirit. So the idea of Gabriel coming to her, Jibril, and blowing into her, and then elevating her to the point where she has direct communication with the divine. And وَصَدَّقَتْ بِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّهَا. And she's someone that accepted the truth of the Lord's word and the various scriptures. وَكُتُبِهِ وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتِينَ. And she is someone who is truly devout. So here it's important that she is siddiqa. She is someone who is sincere, righteous, truthful to God, to the various scripture. And وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتِينَ. And she was truly devout. Now, as I mentioned before, there is this fascinating notion here that she's min al-qanitin, that the Qur'an could have said min al-qanitat, that she is among those who are devout. So even earlier in the chapter, it mentions that the wives of Muhammad could be Muslimat, they could be Muslims, they could be mu'minat, believers, and they could be qanitat. So there's always using the feminine plural. But here, this is the general plural, qanitin. So it's inclusive of both men and women. And this is significant because when you think of Maryam in the Quranic tradition, you always see her as devout to God. There's no man for her to be devout to or loyal to, even be obedient. The only major male figure that emerges for that Maryam is her son, Isa, and Jesus, who actually will speak on her behalf and defend her and say, I will cherish my mother. So to conclude, we see that when we look at Maryam and we look at other places in the Qur'an, the idea of qanitat, of being devout, is exclusively mentioned in relation to being devout to God. So there is no verse, from my knowledge and understanding, that talks about being qanitat to your husband, right? So there's this idea that people should be devout to God, and that includes both men and women. And I think this also speaks to this larger question of gender hierarchy and equality, egalitarianism in the Qur'an. So there's a debate. Some scholars will argue that the Qur'an is misogynistic, it's hierarchical, it favors men over women. And there are others that argue that, well, the Qur'an has this gender equality impulse, that it sees men and women as equal, that they see them as both spiritual beings, and it shows that they both have this important relationship with God. And obviously through my work, I tend to lean towards the latter, that through my work with Maryam, we see there is this emphasis and notion of gender equality or gender egalitarianism. It may be different than modern conceptions, but there is this impulse that I see within the Qur'an and the Quranic language. And we see this with Maryam, that Maryam in this chapter and other verses in the Qur'an is seen as a model for the believers. So in the end of this chapter, we see that the Qur'an says that God sets forth example for the believers, right? Speaking about both men and women, and then gives the example of Maryam. And Maryam is interesting because there is no husband, right? There is no male figure that she's supposed to give devotion to or even obey, but she is someone that is seen as an independent figure, a protagonist, someone who is a teacher, a daughter, as well as a mother. And lastly, we see here that there's been a lot of debate within modern times about social relations, right? So the relationship between men and women, that of various religious communities, of minorities, Christians and Jews, Ahl Kitab. But I think one thing that's important when we look at all these verses is there's a consistent theme, that the Quran is not simply a book about power dynamics, but it's a book that focuses on God, the idea of worshiping God, being devout to God, praying to God, and understanding who God is. So while it's important for us to examine these issues of gender equality and minorities and so forth, I think the central theme of the Quran is creating an individual who is devout to God and understands who God is and the rights of God over the believers. So I think that's really essential, that when we focus on any of these kind of power dynamics or social issues, that we, of course, examine them with great care. At the same time, that there's a larger spiritual and transcendent element that's being of focus. And we see that, of course, with Maryam, that the idea that she is truthful to God and sincere to his book, and among the Devout. Thanks once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. You can order my book, The Islamic Mary, Maryam Through the Centuries. It's been out for a couple of months now, and I've had the opportunity to speak on the book at various locations, most recently here at my University of Shenandoah. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I would encourage your friends, students, and colleagues to listen to this podcast. If you find an episode interesting, fascinating, you could always share it with them and get their thoughts and feedback. We're nearing almost 100 episodes of the Islamic Mary podcast. We have monologues, reflections, Qur'an commentary, as well as interviews, and you're welcome to go through that library and see what you find interesting. You can also review this podcast. People are always looking for things to listen to and to learn, and when they see a lot of reviews of a podcast, they're more encouraged to listen to it. And you can visit my website and join my newsletter to see my various blogs and research articles, as well as books, and to learn more about my Islamic Mary speaking tour. Thanks once again, and take care.